What if I told you there's a country where you can live comfortably on just $500 a month, where horses are still the primary mode of transport in the mountains, and where ancient traditions exist? That sounds so unbelievable, even neighboring Africans think you're making them up. Welcome to Lesotho, the kingdom in the sky that most people can't even pronounce correctly. It's Lesotho, by the way, not Lesotho as most tourists butcher it. This tiny mountain nation sits like a donut hole inside South Africa, completely surrounded by its much larger neighbor. But here's what blows your mind right from the start. Lesotho is the only country on Earth where every single square meter sits above 1,000 meters in altitude. Every single meter. The lowest point in Lesotho is higher than the tallest mountain in 14 US states. That's not a fun fact, that's geography having a laugh at the rest of us. The locals call themselves Basto people, and they've been living in these mountains for centuries, developing a culture so unique that it almost seems fictional. Men walk around in colorful blankets that tell stories about their lives. Horses casually stroll through village centers carrying groceries. And ceremonies happen here that anthropologists still struggle to fully understand. Comment 1 if you've ever heard of a country where the national animal appears on license plates and actually shares the road with cars. But here's the kicker. While tourists spend thousands trying to experience authentic Africa in places that have been sanitized for Western consumption, Lesotho offers the real deal for the price of a decent weekend in any major city. We're talking about a place where $500 doesn't just cover survival. It covers a lifestyle that includes mountain adventures, cultural immersion, and experiences that'll make your Instagram followers question whether you've discovered time travel. The challenge isn't just the budget, though we'll break down every dollar and rand for you. The real challenge is getting your head around a place that operates by completely different rules. This is a country where your neighbor might ride a horse to work, where ancient rituals still determine major life decisions, and where the concept of time moves at the pace of mountain streams, rather than city traffic. So buckle up as we take you inside the kingdom in the sky. Where living on $500 a month isn't just possible. It is the gateway to understanding a way of life that the modern world forgot existed. And trust me, by the end of this story, you'll either be booking a flight or questioning everything you thought you knew about what it means to live well. But first, let's talk about where exactly this magical kingdom sits on the map. Because understanding Lesotho's geography is like understanding why this place operates in its own dimension. Imagine taking Switzerland, dropping it in the middle of Africa, then cranking up the altitude and cultural uniqueness to 11. That's Lesotho in a nutshell. Except this comparison doesn't do justice to just how bizarre this country's geography really is. Lesotho covers about 30,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of Belgium or Maryland, but it's shaped like someone took a bite out of South Africa and forgot to give it back. The entire country is landlocked, not just by one neighbor, but completely encased by South Africa like a geographical Russian doll. You literally cannot enter Lesotho without first going through South Africa, which makes it one of only 3 countries in the world that are completely surrounded by a single other country. The capital, Maseru, sits right on the border with South Africa, and it's where about a third of the country's 2.2 million people live. But calling Maseru a typical African capital would be like calling a mountain goat a typical pet. The city sits at 1,600 meters above sea level. That's higher than Denver, the mile-high city, and most residents think nothing of it. The air is so thin that visitors from sea level spend their first few days wondering why walking up a single flight of stairs feels like running a marathon. But Maseru is just the beginning. As you head inland into what locals call the highlands, the landscape transforms into something that looks more like the surface of an alien planet than anything you'd expect in Africa. The Drakensberg Mountains stretch across the eastern border, with peaks reaching over 3,400 meters. These aren't just tall hills. We're talking about serious alpine terrain where snow falls regularly in winter and where the concept of driving to the next town becomes a multi-hour adventure involving switchback roads. That would make Swiss engineers nervous. The Melody Mountains dominate the interior, creating a landscape of high plateaus, deep valleys, and rock formations that seem to have been designed by an artist with a serious imagination. For the dramatic, rivers cut through these highlands like silver threads, eventually flowing into the Orange River system. But up in the mountains, water behaves differently. Streams that look innocent can become raging torrents within hours, and waterfalls appear and disappear with the seasons. This geography shapes everything about how Basotho people live. Villages are scattered across the highlands, often connected only by paths that horses and donkeys can navigate. Many communities are so remote that the nearest road might be a day's walk away. This isn't poverty. It is a deliberate choice to live in harmony with terrain that doesn't compromise for convenience. The climate here operates on its own schedule too. Because of the altitude, temperatures can swing dramatically. Summer days might reach pleasant to 5°C, but nights can drop to near freezing even in December. Winter is when Lesotho really shows its personality. Snow blankets the highlands, and locals break out traditional blankets that have kept their ancestors warm for generations. This is the only place in Africa where you can legitimately go skiing, and yes, there's actually a ski resort called a Frisky that operates from June to August. What makes this geography even more remarkable is how it created a natural fortress for centuries. These mountains provided protection from conflicts that raged across the region. The Basotho people, under the leadership of King Moshoeshoe I in the 1800s, used the terrain strategically, establishing their capital at Thobabasiu, a flat-top mountain that was virtually impossible to attack. The British eventually established a protectorate here, but unlike most African colonies, Lesotho's geography meant it never fully lost its independence or cultural identity. This natural isolation created something extraordinary, a place where African mountain culture evolved completely separately from the rest of the continent, while coastal regions dealt with colonial ports and trade routes, and lowland areas adapted to agricultural expansion. The Basotho developed a culture specifically designed for high-altitude living. They bred horses that could navigate mountain paths, developed clothing systems for extreme weather variations, and created social structures that could function across scattered, difficult-to-reach communities. Today, this geographical reality means that visiting Lesotho feels like stepping into a parallel version of Africa. The sounds are different. Instead of traffic and urban noise, you hear wind whistling through mountain passes and the clip-clop of horse hooves on stone paths. The air smells of wood smoke and mountain vegetation rather than exhaust fumes. Even the light looks different at this altitude, cleaner and sharper, making colors more vivid. But here's what really gets you. This isn't a theme park or a preserved historical site. This is how 2 million people actually live in the 21st century, using geography that most of the world considers impossible for modern life. They've made it work not by changing the landscape, but by adapting their entire culture to fit it perfectly. Understanding this geographical reality is crucial because it explains everything else about Lesotho. From why horses are still everywhere to why certain traditions survive when they disappeared else. Where to why living costs are so different from what you'd expect. The mountains didn't just shape the land, they shaped an entire way of being human that operates by different rules. Now that you understand where Lesotho sits on the map and why geography matters so much here, let us talk about the people who call this mountain kingdom home and how their daily lives unfold in ways that might surprise you. Walking through a Basotho village at dawn feels like witnessing a perfectly choreographed dance between humans and their environment. The first sounds aren't car engines or alarm clocks. They're roosters crowing at altitudes where most roosters would need oxygen masks, followed by the gentle lowing of cattle and the soft conversations of women preparing for the day's work. The Basotho people have perfected the art of mountain living over centuries, creating a culture that's both deeply practical and surprisingly sophisticated. Family structures here operate like Swiss clockwork, but with an African warmth that makes Swiss efficiency look emotionally constipated. Respect for elders isn't just encouraged, it's built into the language itself. You literally cannot speak Sesotho without acknowledging the age and social position of the person you're addressing. The most visible symbol of Basotho culture is the blanket, and no, this isn't just a fashion choice. It has a complex communication system wrapped around practical mountain wear. The Basotho blanket, with its distinctive patterns and colors, tells stories about the wearer's status, achievements, and even mood. Young men wear different patterns than married men, and women's blankets follow their own intricate code. The most famous pattern, called Sinamorina the Chief's Blanket, is so iconic it appears on the national flag. These blankets serve multiple purposes that showcase the genius of mountain adaptation. During the day, they are worn as cloaks that provide warmth without restricting movement, essential when you might need to chase runaway livestock across rocky terrain. At night, they become bedding. In bad weather, they transform into emergency shelter. European colonists looked at Basotho blankets and saw primitive clothing, completely missing that they were witnessing a multifunctional survival system that had been perfected over generations. Daily life in Basotho villages follows rhythms that urban dwellers forgot existed. Men and boys often spend their days as herdsmen, guiding cattle and sheep across mountain pastures that change with the seasons. This isn't casual ranch work. It's a complex understanding of altitude grazing patterns, weather prediction, and animal behavior that would impress agricultural scientists. Boys as young as 8 learn to read weather signs and cloud formations, and know which plants indicate good grazing at different elevations. Women handle what outsiders might consider the hard work, but that's missing the point entirely. Basotho women are the backbone of agricultural life, managing crops that grow at altitudes where most plants would simply give up. They've developed techniques for growing maize, sorghum, and vegetables in rocky soil with unpredictable weather patterns. Watching a Basotho woman work a mountain garden is like watching someone negotiate with nature and actually win. The agricultural calendar drives everything else. Planting season, which runs from October to December, is when entire communities mobilize. Families work together in a system called matsuma, where neighbors help each other with major tasks like plowing and planting, knowing that the favor will be returned when their turn comes. This isn't just practical cooperation. It has social insurance that ensures no family gets left behind when the weather doesn't cooperate. Harvest time, from April to June, transforms villages into celebration centers. The successful completion of harvest triggers festivals that blend Thanksgiving, matchmaking, and community planning into events that can last for days. These celebrations include traditional beer brewing, competitive storytelling, and the kind of feast preparation that would make professional caterers weep with envy. But daily life isn't all agricultural work. Basotho people have maintained crafts that produce both functional items and income. Women weave grass hats that are so perfectly designed for mountain weather that they've become a national symbol. Men work with leather and wood, creating everything from horse gear to household items. The level of craftsmanship is extraordinary. These aren't tourist trinkets, but tools and clothing designed to last for decades in harsh conditions. Social interactions follow patterns that emphasize community welfare over individual achievement. The concept of Ubuntu, roughly translated as I am because we are, plays out in countless daily decisions. Sharing isn't just polite, it's expected. If your neighbor's cattle break through a fence and eat your crops, the response isn't litigation, but community discussion about how to prevent future problems while ensuring everyone as animals stay fed. Children grow up with responsibilities that would panic helicopter parents, but within a support system that ensures they're never truly unsupervised. A 7-year-old herding sheep alone on a mountain might seem dangerous until you realize that every adult in a 5-kilometer radius knows where that child is supposed to be and will check on them. Throughout the day, education happens on multiple levels simultaneously. Formal schooling, when available, follows standard curricula, but real education happens through participation in daily life. Children learn weather prediction, animal husbandry, plant identification, and social dynamics through direct experience rather than textbooks. By age 10, most Basotho children possess survival skills that would impress military trainers. The day ends with storytelling sessions that serve multiple purposes. Entertainment, yes, but also oral history preservation, moral instruction, and community bonding. These aren't casual bedtime stories. They're sophisticated narrative systems that encode centuries of accumulated wisdom about everything from conflict resolution to resource management. What strikes visitors most is how seamlessly traditional and modern elements blend. A herdsman might check weather forecasts on a smartphone while wearing traditional blankets and leading cattle along paths his great-grandfather used. Solar panels power LED lights in huts built using construction techniques that haven't changed in centuries. This cultural adaptation extends to time perception. The Western obsession with schedules and deadlines exists alongside a deeper understanding of natural rhythms. Meetings happen when people arrive, not when clocks dictate. Projects get completed when conditions are right, not because arbitrary deadlines demand it. Living this way requires a completely different relationship with uncertainty and planning. Basotho people plan extensively for known variables like seasons and traditional obligations, but maintain flexibility for the unexpected weather, livestock behavior, and family emergencies that mountain life regularly produces. The result is a culture that's simultaneously ancient and completely practical for contemporary challenges. Climate change, economic uncertainty, and social disruption, the problems that keep urban populations awake at night, are challenges Basotho culture has been managing for centuries. Through community cooperation, environmental adaptation, and flexible planning. Now let us talk about something every traveler wants to know. What do you actually eat in the kingdom in the sky? And how do meal times work when your nearest restaurant might be a day's horseback ride away? Forget everything you think you know about African cuisine, because Basotho food culture is what happens when high-altitude living meets centuries of culinary evolution. This isn't about exotic spices or complex preparations. It is about creating maximum nutrition and comfort from ingredients that can survive mountain weather and provide energy for people living at altitudes where oxygen is optional. The foundation of every Basotho meal is papa, and no, that is not a cute nickname for dad. It is a maize porridge that is basically the Swiss Army knife of African cuisine. Papa looks deceptively simple, like slightly thick oatmeal, but it is actually a carefully calibrated carbohydrate delivery system designed for people who might spend 12 hours herding livestock across mountain terrain. Making proper papa is an art form that separates the locals from the tourists. The maize meal gets cooked to specific consistencies depending on the meal. Thicker for dinner, when you need sustained energy, slightly thinner for breakfast when you need quick fuel. The stirring technique matters too. Experienced cooks can tell from the sound and resistance whether the papa is reaching the right texture. Screw this up, and you either get wallpaper paste or soup, neither of which will sustain you through a day of mountain work. Papa never gets eaten alone. It's always accompanied by relish. And this is where Basotho cuisine shows its creative genius. The most common pairing is papala, muroho porridge with greens, but calling it greens understates what's happening here. Muroho includes whatever leafy vegetables are available: wild spinach, pumpkin leaves, bean leaves, or any of dozens of mountain plants that Basotho people know are edible and nutritious. These greens get cooked with onions, tomatoes when available, and seasoning that varies by family recipe and what's growing nearby. The meat component of Basotho cuisine centers around what the mountains provide. Mutton and beef dominate, but not in the way Western palates expect. Meat gets prepared for preservation, as well as immediate consumption. Biltong, dry meat strips, might be familiar to travelers who visited South Africa, but Basotho preparation methods produce versions that stay nutritious and flavorful for months. Without refrigeration, stews are where Basotho cooks really show their skills. Lakobi is the national dish, combining beans, sorghum, and whatever vegetables are seasoned into a hearty stew that provides complete protein and enough calories to fuel high-altitude work. The cooking process takes hours, with ingredients added in specific sequences that maximize flavor and nutrition. The result tastes like what would happen if your grandmother's best soup recipe got adapted for feeding people who work in conditions that would hospitalize office workers. But here is where things get interesting for budget travelers. These traditional foods are incredibly cheap when you're buying ingredients and cooking for yourself. A month's worth of maize meal costs about $1.10. Dried beans and basic vegetables add maybe Another $15 if you're living rurally and can buy directly from farmers. Meat prices drop dramatically. You can literally eat traditional Lesotho meals for under $30 a month while getting better nutrition than most Western diets provide. The beverage situation in Lesotho reveals a culture that figured out fermentation long before anyone explained the science behind it. Traditional sorghum beer, called wala, is more than just alcohol. It's liquid nutrition that provides B vitamins, carbohydrates, and calories in a form that's safe to drink when water quality is questionable. While preparation is community science in action, women grind sorghum grain, add water, and control fermentation through techniques passed down through generations. The process takes several days, during which the mixture gets stirred, tasted, and adjusted based on environmental conditions like temperature and humidity. The final product has relatively low alcohol content, usually around 3 to 4%, but high nutritional value. Modern Lesotho also embraces South African beverage influences, particularly rooibos tea and ginger beer. Rooibos grows wild in some highland areas, and locals harvest and prepare it using methods that produce tea with completely different flavor profiles than commercial versions. Ginger beer gets made fresh in many villages, with ginger grown in mountain gardens producing drinks that have enough kick to wake up altitude sluggish metabolisms. Coffee culture in Lesotho is evolving rapidly, especially in Maseru. Small cafes serving South African-style coffee drinks are appearing, but with local twists. Highland honey replaces sugar, and some cafes experiment with adding traditional herbs to create drinks that taste familiar to international palates but include local flavors. The social aspects of eating in Lesotho require cultural adaptation that can challenge Western individualism. Meals are communal events where sharing isn't just polite, it's expected. If you're eating and someone arrives, you offer to share, regardless of whether you have enough for yourself. This isn't symbolic politeness. It's practical insurance in a culture where your neighbor's generosity today might be your survival tomorrow. Mealtimes follow natural rhythms rather than clock schedules. Breakfast happens when morning work gets started, usually around sunrise. Lunch occurs when the sun is high and work breaks naturally. Dinner begins when evening work ends and the family gathers. Trying to impose rigid meal schedules on this rhythm is like trying to make mountain streams run uphill. Food storage and preservation showcase centuries of innovation in environments without refrigeration. Root cellars carved into mountainsides maintain consistent temperatures year-round. Drying techniques preserve vegetables and meat through seasonal variations. Fermentation preserves dairy products in forms that remain safe and nutritious for weeks. For budget travelers, understanding Lesotho food culture opens opportunities that restaurants can't provide. Rural families often welcome visitors who want to learn traditional cooking methods. These are formal cooking classes. They are cultural exchanges where you help with food preparation while learning techniques that have sustained mountain communities for generations. The ingredient costs in rural areas are so low that food becomes almost negligible in budget calculations, but only if you're willing to eat like locals rather than seeking familiar Western foods. Imported items like coffee, processed foods, and anything requiring refrigeration carry price premiums that can destroy budget plans quickly. Alcohol availability varies dramatically between rural and urban areas. Maseru has bars, nightclubs, and restaurants serving international drinks at prices comparable to other African capitals. Rural areas rely primarily on traditional brewing, with commercial alcohol available but expensive due to transportation costs. The fascinating aspect of Lesotho food culture is how it balances nutrition, economics, and social function simultaneously. Meals aren't just fuel, they're community building, cultural preservation, and resource sharing wrapped in dining experiences that taste better than their simple ingredients suggest they should. This foundation of community-centered eating creates social dynamics that extend far beyond food, especially in how relationships and social connections develop in mountain communities, where your neighbors aren't just people who live nearby, they rate your economic and social lifeline. Dating in Lesotho operates by rules that would make modern relationship apps crash. From sheer confusion, This is a culture where arranged marriages coexist with love matches, where traditional gender roles blend with women who run businesses and households with equal authority, and where social interactions follow patterns that emphasize community approval over individual desire. Basotho women possess a reputation for strength that borders on legendary among Southern African cultures. These aren't stereotypical strong women who get praised for doing traditionally male work. These are women whose roles within traditional culture require capabilities that would challenge anyone. Managing households at altitude, raising children in scattered communities, maintaining agricultural systems in unpredictable weather, and handling family economics requires skills that combine physical toughness with sophisticated planning abilities. The traditional Basotho approach to relationships begins with understanding that marriage isn't just between two people, it is between two families, two economic systems, and to social networks. This creates a dating culture that emphasizes long-term compatibility over short-term attraction. Though romantic love definitely factors into the equation, young Basotho women and men typically meet through community events, church gatherings, and extended family connections rather than through individual choice encounters. Rural areas especially rely on festivals, work parties, and seasonal celebrations as matchmaking opportunities. These events serve multiple purposes: their entertainment, cultural preservation, and relationship formation all happening simultaneously. The courting process follows stages that ensure both families approve of potential matches. Initial interest gets expressed through intermediaries rather than direct approaches. A young man interested in a woman might approach her relatives or family friends to express his intentions. This isn't because direct communication is forbidden, but because successful relationships require community support, and building that support begins before the relationship becomes serious. What surprises many outsiders is how much agency Basotho women have within traditional structures. Women can reject suitors, delay marriage to pursue education or economic opportunities, and maintain significant authority within households once married. The culture recognizes that strong families require strong women, and social structures support female decision-making rather than constraining it. Modern Lesotho presents interesting contrasts in dating culture between urban and rural areas. Lesotho has developed dating patterns similar to other African capitals, with young people meeting through work, education, and social events. Smartphones and social media have created dating opportunities that bypass traditional family involvement. Though family approval remains important for serious relationships, the economic realities of Lesotho significantly influence relationship dynamics. Many young men work in South African mines or urban centers, creating long-distance relationships that test traditional partnership patterns. Women often manage households and businesses independently for extended periods, developing self-reliance that changes power dynamics within marriages. Education levels among Basotho women are notably high compared to many African countries, creating situations where women often have better formal education than potential male partners. This educational achievement influences relationship expectations, with educated women seeking partners who respect their achievements rather than feeling threatened by them. The Bahali system, traditional bride price negotiations, continues alongside modern relationship practices, but with evolved meanings. Rather than being purely transactional, Bahali serves as a demonstration of the groom's commitment and his family's ability to support the marriage. The negotiations involve cattle, money, or other valuable items, but the process itself is more important than the specific amounts. Social interactions between unmarried men and women follow guidelines that balance traditional modesty with practical necessities. Rural areas especially require cooperation between genders for economic survival, so social mixing happens naturally through work activities, though with understood boundaries about appropriate behavior. The concept of matsoal adds complexity to social relationships in Lesotho. These are intense, socially recognized friendships between women that can include emotional intimacy, financial cooperation, and household sharing. Matsoal relationships aren't necessarily romantic, but they provide social support systems that can be more stable than marriages. Nightlife and entertainment in Maseru offer dating opportunities through bars, restaurants, and cultural events, but always within social contexts that assume community connections. Privacy in relationships exists, but complete independence from family and community involvement is neither expected nor easily achieved. The practical aspects of dating in Lesotho include transportation challenges that influence how relationships develop. Rural areas require significant planning for couples to spend time together, which actually serves as a compatibility test. Relationships that survive logistical difficulties often have strong foundations. Marriage ceremonies blend traditional and contemporary elements, with families negotiating how much of each to include. Church weddings are common, but traditional ceremonies involving extended family participation, community feasting, and cultural performances remain important for social recognition. For international visitors interested in local social life, understanding cultural expectations is crucial. Basotho people are generally friendly and hospitable, but romantic relationships with visitors carry cultural weight that requires respect for community standards. Casual dating attitudes that might be acceptable elsewhere can create social problems in communities where everyone knows everyone. The gender dynamics in Lesotho reflect a culture that values both traditional roles and practical flexibility. Women who demonstrate capability in traditionally male areas gain respect rather than criticism, while men who support female achievement are seen as strong rather than weak. Economic partnerships between spouses often involve complex arrangements where both parties maintain some independent income sources while sharing household responsibilities. This creates relationship dynamics based on mutual benefit, rather than traditional dependency patterns. Social gatherings that facilitate relationship formation include church events, community work projects, and cultural celebrations. These provide natural opportunities for interaction while maintaining community oversight that supports successful long-term relationships. The challenges facing modern Basotho relationships include migration pressures, economic uncertainty, and changing cultural expectations. Young people balance desires for modern relationship freedoms with respect for traditional values that provide social stability and family support. What emerges from this complex social landscape is a dating culture that prioritizes community harmony and long-term stability while adapting to contemporary realities. Success in relationships requires navigating traditional expectations, family dynamics, and modern opportunities in ways that honor cultural values while meeting individual needs. This relationship foundation connects to broader cultural celebrations and traditional practices that continue to shape how Basotho people mark important life transitions and maintain connections to ancestral wisdom that visitors find both fascinating and deeply meaningful. The sound hits you first, drums that seem to make the mountain itself vibrate, followed by voices harmonizing in ways that suggest these people learn music from the wind patterns themselves. Then you see the dancers, moving in formations that look choreographed but flow with the natural spontaneity of leaves caught in mountain breezes. Welcome to Basotho cultural celebrations, where entertainment and sacred tradition blend so seamlessly that tourists often miss. They ray witnessing ceremonies that predate written history. The Morija Arts and Cultural Festival, held annually in October, serves as the gateway for outsiders to experience Basotho culture without stumbling accidentally into sacred spaces. This festival transforms the small town of Morija into a cultural showcase where traditional music, dance, crafts, and storytelling compete for recognition while educating visitors about customs that might otherwise remain hidden. But calling Morija just a festival misses the deeper reality. It's cultural preservation in action. Traditional praise singers perform historical narratives that function as oral libraries, preserving stories about kings, battles, migrations, and social changes that shape Basotho identity. These aren't entertainment performances, they're living history lessons delivered through musical traditions that encode information more reliably than written records. The musical instruments alone tell stories about cultural adaptation. The lasiba, a single-string bow instrument, produces haunting melodies that carry across mountain valleys, serving both as entertainment and long-distance communication. The thomo, a mouth bow, creates intimate music for personal expression and courtship. These instruments evolved specifically for mountain acoustics, designed to work with natural sound properties that amplify certain frequencies, while dampening others. Traditional bass-though music operates on scales and rhythmic patterns that sound foreign to Western ears but perfectly match the cadences of Lesotho language and the rhythms of mountain life. Songs exist for specific activities: herding songs that keep cattle calm, work songs that coordinate group labor, celebration songs that bind communities together during festivals. But the real cultural treasures are the hidden traditions that most visitors never encounter. The male initiation ceremony, Lebolo La Bana, remains one of the most closely guarded cultural practices in Africa. Boys disappear into mountain schools for weeks or months, returning as men with knowledge, scars, and social status that completely transforms their roles within communities. These initiation schools aren't casual wilderness camps, they rate intensive cultural universities where boys learn everything from traditional medicine and survival skills to social responsibilities and spiritual practices. The knowledge transmitted during initiation includes botanical information about mountain plants, weather prediction techniques, conflict resolution methods, and oral histories that connect initiates to ancestral wisdom. The secrecy surrounding initiation isn't just tradition, it's protection. The knowledge and experiences shared during these ceremonies are considered so powerful that premature or inappropriate exposure could damage both individuals and communities. Outsiders who've attempted to document or participate in initiation ceremonies report being turned away firmly but politely, with explanations that some knowledge requires earning through cultural participation rather than academic curiosity. Female initiation practices, while less secretive, involve equally intensive cultural education. Young women learn traditional medicine, including herbal remedies that remain effective for conditions that challenge modern healthcare. They study household management, child-rearing practices, and agricultural techniques that have sustained mountain communities. Through centuries of environmental challenges, the ancestors play active roles in contemporary Basotho spiritual life through practices that blend traditional beliefs with Christian influences. Ancestor veneration involves regular ceremonies where families communicate with deceased relatives, seeking guidance for important decisions and requesting protection during difficult times. These ceremonies include specific foods, traditional beer, and ritual procedures that maintain family connections across generations. Traditional healing practices operate alongside modern medicine, with sangomas and traditional doctors maintaining knowledge about plant medicines that grow only at specific altitudes. Under particular conditions, these healers diagnose and treat conditions using methods that combine botanical knowledge, psychological counseling, and spiritual intervention. The horse culture of Lesotho connects to traditions that few outsiders fully understand. Horses aren't just transportation, they're partners in mountain survival, companions in dangerous terrain, and symbols of status and capability. The relationship between Basotho people and their horses involves communication methods, training techniques, and care practices that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of equine psychology and mountain travel requirements. Pony trekking adventures available to tourists provide glimpses of this horse culture. But the real relationship between Basotho people and horses requires years of mountain living. To fully appreciate, horses in Lesotho navigate terrain that would challenge experienced hikers, following paths visible only to animals and humans who've spent lifetimes reading mountain geography. Traditional architecture includes construction techniques that create buildings capable of withstanding extreme weather variations, while using only locally available materials. Stone houses built using these methods remain structurally sound for decades without maintenance that would be required for modern construction in similar conditions. The Basotho blanket traditions extend beyond fashion into cultural communication systems. Specific patterns indicate social status, achievements, family affiliations, and even emotional states. Learning to read blanket symbolism provides insights into community dynamics that remain invisible to casual observers. Seasonal celebrations mark agricultural cycles, astronomical events, and community milestones through festivals that combine practical planning with cultural reinforcement. These celebrations serve multiple functions: their entertainment, social coordination, cultural education, and spiritual practice, all happening simultaneously. The praise poetry traditions of Lesotho include competitive performances, where poets create elaborate verses celebrating individuals, communities, or historical events. These competitions require extensive cultural knowledge, linguistic creativity, and performance skills that transform poetry into athletic events, drawing crowds comparable to sports competitions. Traditional games and sports include activities that develop skills necessary for mountain survival, while providing community entertainment. Stick fighting competitions teach combat techniques while reinforcing social hierarchies. Racing competitions include both human and horse events that demonstrate capabilities essential for mountain travel. The integration of traditional and contemporary cultural elements creates unique hybrid celebrations, where ancient ceremonies incorporate modern technology, international influences, and contemporary concerns while maintaining essential traditional meanings. What makes these cultural practices especially remarkable is their continued relevance for contemporary challenges. Traditional environmental knowledge helps communities adapt to climate change. Ancient conflict resolution methods provide alternatives to modern legal systems. Historical agricultural techniques offer solutions for sustainable mountain farming. For budget travelers, cultural participation often costs nothing but requires respect for community standards and genuine interest in learning rather than just observing. Many traditional events welcome respectful visitors who understand they are guests in cultural spaces rather than tourists consuming entertainment products. The hidden aspects of Basotho culture reveal themselves gradually to visitors, who invest time in building relationships rather than seeking immediate access to sacred traditions. Understanding these cultural layers requires patience, respect, and willingness to participate and see community life rather than merely documenting it. Now that you understand the cultural richness that makes Lesotho unique, let us break down the practical reality of actually living here on a $500 monthly budget. Because understanding the culture is one thing, but making your money stretch in the kingdom of the sky requires some serious financial planning. Here's where the rubber meets the mountain road, or in Lesotho's case, where your budget meets the reality of living at altitudes, where everything from breathing to boiling water works differently. The good news is that $500 a month isn't just survivable in Lesotho. It can actually buy you a lifestyle that would cost thousands in most Western countries. The challenge is understanding how money flows in an economy where cash transactions coexist with bartering, where seasonal variations affect everything, and where your biggest expenses might be completely different from what you expect. Let's start with accommodation, because shelter in the mountains isn't just about having a roof. It is about staying warm when temperatures drop unexpectedly and staying connected to communities. That might be your lifeline during emergencies. In Maseru, budget accommodation ranges from $15 to $30 per night for basic guest houses. But monthly rentals change the math dramatically. A basic room at a shared house in Maseru averages around $80 to $120 per month, including utilities. These aren't luxury accommodations. You're looking at simple furniture, shared bathroom facilities, and heating that might involve blankets and hot water bottles rather than central systems. But they're clean, safe, and connected to water and electricity systems that work reliably most of the time. Rural accommodation costs drop even further, but with trade-offs that require cultural adaptation. Village homestays can cost as little as $30 to $50 per month, but expect to participate in household activities, adapt to family schedules, and live without amenities that urban accommodations provide. Rural housing often means pit, toilets, wood-fired cooking, and water sourced from community wells or springs. The sweet spot for budget travelers might be small towns between Maseru and the deep rural areas. Towns like Teiteneng, Leribe, or Mohales-Hoke offer accommodation for $60 to $80 per month while providing access to shops, transportation, and cultural activities without the isolation of remote villages or the cost of the capital. Food costs reveal where understanding local culture translates directly into budget savings. Shopping at municipal markets in Maseru and buying staples like maize meal, beans, and vegetables can keep food expenses under $40 per month. This requires cooking for yourself and eating like locals rather than seeking familiar Western foods. The price differences between local and imported foods are dramatic. A kilogram of maize meal costs about $1, enough to provide carbohydrates for a week. Local vegetables like cabbage, onions, and potatoes cost pennies per kilogram when purchased directly from farmers. Fresh meat from local sources costs $3 to $5 per kilogram, but imported processed foods can cost 10 times as much. Traditional foods aren't just cheaper, they're designed for the local climate and lifestyle. Papa maize porridge provides sustained energy for high-altitude activities, while costing almost nothing to prepare. Sorghum and dried beans create complete proteins while storing safely without refrigeration. Transportation costs in Lesotho follow patterns that reward planning and flexibility while penalizing hurried travel. Minibus taxis, the primary public transportation, charge by distance and route popularity. A ride across Maseru costs about 50 cents, while intercity travel to places like Leribe or Butterbuth runs $3 to $5. The catch is that minibus schedules follow passenger loads rather than fixed timetables. Buses leave when full, which might mean waiting hours during off-peak times. Understanding these rhythms can save significant money. Traveling during popular times ensures frequent service, while off-peak travel might require overnight stays that add accommodation costs. Long-distance travel within Lesotho can be expensive relative to local wages, with trips to remote highland areas costing $20 to $30 each way. Budget travelers often find that staying in one area for extended periods makes more economic sense than trying to see everything quickly. Utilities and communication costs are where modern convenience meets mountain realities. Electricity is available in most towns and cities, with monthly costs for basic usage running $10 to $20. Rural areas increasingly have access to electricity, though reliability varies with weather and maintenance schedules. Mobile phone service covers most of Lesotho, with prepaid plans offering data and calling minutes for $10 to $15 per month internet access in. Maseru approaches South African standards. While rural connectivity can be intermittent but functional for basic communication and research, water costs depend entirely on location and source. Urban areas provide treated water through municipal systems for minimal monthly fees. Rural areas often rely on community wells, springs, or rainwater collection systems that require labor rather than cash payments. Heating and cooking. Fuel represents significant expenses that vary by location and season. Urban areas offer electricity, gas, and paraffin options, while rural areas rely heavily on wood and coal. Understanding local fuel sources and seasonal availability can dramatically affect monthly expenses. Healthcare costs in Lesotho are generally low compared to Western standards, but access and quality vary significantly by location. Government clinics provide basic services for minimal fees, while private healthcare in Maseru offers better service at costs that remain reasonable by international standards. Entertainment and cultural activities often cost very little or nothing, but require cultural participation rather than tourist consumption. Village festivals, traditional music performances, and community celebrations welcome respectful visitors without admission fees. The catch is that meaningful cultural participation often involves reciprocal gestures, bringing food to share, contributing to community projects, or offering skills that benefit local families. These contributions aren't expensive, but require time and genuine engagement, rather than passive observation. Shopping for daily necessities reveals dramatic price differences between local and imported goods. Soap, basic clothing, and household items produced in South Africa cost significantly less than international brands. Learning to identify quality local products can reduce daily expenses while supporting regional economies. Seasonal cost variations affect everything from food prices to transportation availability. Harvest seasons bring abundant cheap food, but limited transportation as vehicles get used for crop movement. Planting seasons create labor opportunities, but increase food costs as stored supplies dwindle. The $500 monthly budget becomes comfortable when allocated roughly as follows: $80 to $100 for accommodation, $50 to $80 for food, $30 to $50 for transportation, $20 to $30 for utilities and communication, $20 to $30 for healthcare and personal items, leaving $180 to $290 for activities, savings, or unexpected expenses. This budget assumes living like locals rather than maintaining Western lifestyle standards. Success requires flexibility, cultural adaptation, and willingness to find entertainment through community participation rather than commercial activities. The hidden costs that can destroy budgets include emergency transportation, imported food cravings, and attempting to maintain privacy standards that might not be realistic in communal living situations. Understanding these potential pitfalls helps maintain financial stability while adapting to mountain life. What makes the $500 budget work is that Lesotho's economy operates on scales, where small amounts of money can provide significant lifestyle improvements, but only when spent according to local economic patterns rather than imported expectations. Understanding these financial realities leads naturally to questions about how you actually move around in a country where the concept of just drive there becomes an adventure requiring careful planning and possibly alternative transportation methods. Getting around Lesotho is like playing a real-life strategy game where weather, altitude, and the laws of physics team up to challenge every assumption you have about transportation. This is a country where your daily commute might involve dodging livestock on mountain paths, where traffic jams consist of cattle herds crossing roads, and where the phrase "I'll be there in an hour" becomes a rough estimate. That could vary by several hours depending on circumstances beyond human control. The minibus taxi system forms the backbone of public transportation, but calling it a system suggests more organization than actually exists. These vehicles are typically Toyota Hiace vans or similar models that have been modified to carry more passengers than their manufacturers ever intended. A standard minibus might officially seat 15 people, but in practice, it carries whoever needs to travel plus their luggage, groceries, small livestock, and occasionally furniture. Riding in minibuses requires cultural adaptation and physical flexibility. Passengers squeeze into configurations that would violate multiple safety regulations in other countries, but everyone understands this is how mountain transportation works. The drivers possess skills that would impress stunt coordinators, navigating switchback mountain roads while managing passenger loads that shift with every turn. The loading process operates on principles that prioritize community needs over individual convenience. Buses don't leave on schedules, they leave when full. This might mean waiting 15 minutes during peak travel times or several hours when fewer people are traveling. Smart travelers learn to plan around these rhythms rather than fighting them. Routes connect major towns and villages through networks that prioritize practical destinations over tourist attractions. Getting from Maseru to Semingkong near Malatsinyane Falls involves multiple connections and careful timing, but costs under $10 and provides authentic cultural interaction that tour buses can't match. The road conditions in Lesotho range from excellent to how is this even considered a road? The main highways connecting major towns are generally well-maintained paved routes that handle normal traffic efficiently. Secondary roads serving rural areas might be gravel, dirt, or simply paths that vehicles follow based on tradition rather than engineering. Weather affects transportation in ways that force schedule flexibility. Snow can close mountain passes for days during winter. Rain can make dirt roads impassable until they dry out. Wind can make certain routes dangerous for high-profile vehicles. These are minor inconveniences. They raise seasonal realities that influence how people plan everything from family visits to business trips. Private vehicle rental is possible in Maseru, with basic cars available for $30 to $50 per day. However, driving in Lesotho requires skills and knowledge that most international visitors don't possess. Mountain driving techniques, understanding local traffic patterns, and knowing which routes are passable during different weather conditions are essential for safe travel. The insurance and liability issues around vehicle accidents in remote areas can create serious problems for unprepared travelers. Breakdown assistance might involve waiting for help from passing vehicles rather than calling professional services. Fuel availability outside major towns requires planning, especially for trips into highland areas. Horseback transportation remains practical and common in highland areas, where vehicles can't operate effectively. Pony trekking isn't just a tourist activity, it is legitimate transportation that can access terrain impossible for motorized vehicles. Many villages rely on horses for regular supply runs, medical emergencies, and communication with outside areas. The Bastho horses used for mountain travel are specifically bred for high-altitude work and rough terrain navigation. These aren't recreational riding horses. They're working animals trained to carry loads, navigate dangerous paths, and survive in conditions that would challenge more pampered breeds. Learning basic horsemanship skills opens transportation options that dramatically expand access to rural areas and cultural experiences. Village families often rent horses to visitors who demonstrate competent riding abilities, providing income for local communities while offering transportation that tour companies can't replicate. Walking remains a primary transportation mode for many Bastho people, especially for short distances and terrain access. The walking paths connecting villages follow routes optimized for foot traffic, often taking shortcuts through terrain that vehicles can't handle. These footpaths represent centuries of route optimization, following contours that minimize elevation changes while connecting communities efficiently. Understanding these path networks requires local knowledge that comes from living in specific areas rather than map reading. Seasonal transportation patterns reflect agricultural and social cycles that influence when and how people move around the country. Planting and harvest seasons create transportation demands that can overwhelm normal capacity. School terms influence family travel patterns. Cultural celebrations draw people from remote areas to central locations. Border crossings between Lesotho and South Africa operate through numerous points that vary in convenience and processing efficiency. The main crossing at Maseru Bridge handles most international traffic, but smaller crossings might offer shorter waits and less bureaucratic complexity. Understanding border procedures require documentation, and operating hours prevents transportation delays that can affect travel budgets and schedules. Some crossings close at night or operate with reduced hours during weekends. The lifestyle implications of Lesotho's transportation realities extend far beyond simple travel inconvenience. Social relationships adapt to transportation constraints. Friendships and family connections account for the difficulty and expense of frequent visits. Economic opportunities concentrate around transportation hubs where goods and services can reach markets efficiently. Community cooperation becomes essential when transportation resources are limited and expensive. Families coordinate travel to maximize efficiency, share transportation costs, and help neighbors access services that require travel to distant locations. Emergency transportation presents serious challenges in remote areas where helicopter rescue is available and road access might be impossible during certain weather conditions. Understanding these limitations influences decisions about where to live, what activities to pursue, and how to prepare for medical or other emergencies. The time perception adjustments required for Lesotho transportation help visitors understand broader cultural approaches to scheduling and planning. Rushing doesn't make many buses leave faster or improve road conditions, so successful adaptation involves finding patience and flexibility rather than fighting unchangeable realities. For budget travelers, mastering local transportation systems provides access to experiences and locations that organized tours can't reach while maintaining expenses within reasonable limits. The trade-off involves time, comfort, and convenience, but the cultural immersion and cost savings often justify the inconvenience. This transportation reality shapes how visitors experience Lesotho's natural attractions and outdoor activities. because getting to the spectacular scenery requires understanding how to navigate mountain logistics rather than simply following GPS directions. Lesotho's natural attractions exist in a category that makes travel writers resort to hyperbole, because accurate descriptions sound like fantasy. This is a country where waterfalls drop from heights that would make Niagara Falls look modest, where you can ski in Africa while watching eagles soar below you, and where wilderness areas remain so untouched that you might be the first human to see certain views from specific angles. Malatsinyane Falls, near Semingang, demonstrates what happens when gravity and geography collaborate to create something that defies comprehension. The water drops 192 meters in a single vertical plunge, making it one of the highest single-drop waterfalls in Africa. But those numbers don't convey the visceral impact of standing near something that powerful. The sound carries for kilometers, and the mist creates microclimates that support vegetation impossible at that altitude anywhere else. The hike to Malatsinyane Falls requires moderate fitness and careful planning, but rewards visitors with perspectives that can't be captured in photographs. The trail follows river valleys that showcase Lesotho's geological diversity, passing through ecosystems that change dramatically with elevation and water availability. Rock formations reveal geological processes that stretch back millions of years. Sandy Pass represents the engineering audacity required to connect Lesotho's highlands with South African lowlands through terrain that seems designed to prevent human passage. The road climbs from around 1,400 meters to over 2,900 meters through switchbacks that would challenge mountain goats. The pass operates as both practical transportation route and extreme adventure activity. The views from Sandy Pass include perspectives across both countries that provide geographic context for understanding how dramatically Lesotho's mountain environment differs from surrounding areas. On clear days, visibility extends far enough to see how this mountain kingdom rises like an island from the South African plateau. Winter snow sports in Lesotho sound like geographical impossibilities until you experience them personally. A frisky mountain resort operates ski slopes that function because of the combination of altitude, latitude, and weather patterns that create snow conditions during South African winter months. Skiing in Africa becomes reality rather than novelty. The resort operates with equipment and facilities that accommodate skiers familiar with international standards while adapting to local conditions. And logistics, accommodation, equipment rental, and instruction services provide complete ski experiences, though at costs significantly higher than other Lesotho activities. Selabathab National Park preserves wilderness areas that represent what southern Africa looked like before human development altered most landscapes. The park protects high-altitude ecosystems that include plant and animal species found nowhere else on Earth. Hiking trails provide access to wilderness areas where solitude is genuine rather than manufactured. The park's accommodation facilities offer basic camping and lodge options that maintain minimal environmental impact while providing access to hiking, photography, and wildlife observation opportunities. The remoteness that makes access challenging also ensures that visitor numbers remain low enough to preserve the wilderness experience. Selanya National Park protects mountain forest ecosystems that demonstrate how different high-altitude African environments are from typical safari landscapes. The forests include tree species adapted to extreme weather variations and soil conditions unique to Lesotho's geological composition. Birdwatching in Selanyan reveals species diversity that includes endemic birds found only in Lesotho's highland environments. The forest ecosystems support bird populations that migrate seasonally between South African lowlands and Lesotho highlands, creating viewing opportunities that vary dramatically by season. Katstan creates artificial landscapes that blend engineering achievement with natural beauty. The dam supplies water to South African urban centers while creating recreational opportunities and altered ecosystems within Lesotho. The engineering scale impresses visitors familiar with major infrastructure projects. Boat trips on Kats Dam provide access to mountain scenery from water level, perspectives impossible to achieve through land travel. The reservoir extends into mountain valleys that remain roadless, offering wilderness views accessible only by water. Pony trekking adventures combine transportation, cultural experience, and wilderness access in ways that motorized tourism can't replicate. Multi-day treks reach highland areas where accommodation happens in traditional villages, or wilderness camping sites that provide authentic mountain experiences. The horses used for these treks navigate terrain that challenges experienced hikers, following paths through landscapes that change dramatically with elevation and weather conditions. Trekking guides possess local knowledge about route conditions, weather patterns, and cultural protocols that ensure both safety and authentic experiences. Rock art sites scattered throughout Lesotho preserve artistic evidence of human occupation that predates written history. These sites include cave paintings and rock engravings that document hunting practices, social structures, and spiritual beliefs of peoples who lived in these mountains for thousands of years. Accessing rock art sites often requires local guides who know specific locations and understand cultural protocols for visiting areas that retain spiritual significance for contemporary communities. These visits provide historical context that transforms understanding of how long humans have adapted to Lesotho's mountain environments. Geological formations throughout Lesotho reveal landscape evolution processes that created the dramatic topography visitors experience. Today, sandstone formations, volcanic remnants, and erosion patterns visible from hiking trails provide outdoor geology lessons that explain how these mountains form and continue changing. The Drakensberg Mountains along Lesotho's eastern border include peaks that challenge serious mountaineers while offering hiking opportunities for various skill levels. Routes range from day hikes to multi-day expeditions that require technical climbing skills and specialized equipment. Wildlife in Lesotho includes species adapted to high-altitude environments that differ significantly from typical African safari animals. Small antelope species, mountain birds, and specialized plant communities create ecosystems that require different observation techniques and timing than lowland wildlife viewing. Photography opportunities in Lesotho include landscapes, cultural subjects, and wildlife that provide material for portfolios documenting experiences impossible to find elsewhere. The lighting conditions at altitude create photographic opportunities that change dramatically throughout the day and seasons. Adventure activities beyond hiking and pony trekking include rock climbing, abseiling near waterfalls, fishing in mountain streams, and winter sports that take advantage of seasonal snow conditions. These activities require equipment and skills that might not be available locally, necessitating advanced planning and preparation. The seasonal variations in Lesotho's natural attractions mean that visit timing significantly affects what activities are possible and what scenery is accessible. Summer hiking conditions differ dramatically from winter snow sports opportunities and spring wild flower displays create temporary attractions that don't exist during other seasons. For budget travelers, accessing these natural attractions requires balancing transportation costs, accommodation expenses, and activity fees against the desire to experience unique environments. Many attractions are accessible through local transportation and basic accommodation, while others require specialized services that increase costs significantly. Understanding these natural attractions leads to practical questions about health, safety, and basic logistics for visitors who want to experience the kingdom in the sky without encountering problems that could derail travel plans or budgets. Living in the kingdom in the sky means navigating safety and health challenges that most travel guides gloss over because they involve realities more complex than simple do's and don'ts. This isn't about avoiding tourist scams or finding the nearest embassy. It is about understanding how altitude, isolation, and cultural differences create safety considerations that require preparation and adaptation, rather than just common sense. Personal safety in Lesotho operates on different principles than most African countries. Violent crime rates remain relatively low, especially in rural areas where community social controls make antisocial behavior difficult to hide and harder to escape consequences. The challenge isn't avoiding dangerous neighborhoods. It's understanding that safety depends more on weather, geography, and medical access than human threats. Petty theft in Maseru follows patterns similar to other African capitals: pickpocketing, purse snatching, and opportunistic theft target visitors who display wealth or appear unfamiliar with local conditions. The standard precautions apply. Don't flash expensive items, avoid walking alone at night, and maintain awareness of surroundings in crowded areas. Rural areas present different safety considerations that center around environmental hazards rather than criminal activity. Mountain weather can change rapidly, creating hypothermia risks even during summer months. Flash floods can make normally safe river crossings dangerous within minutes. Altitude sickness affects some visitors who ascend quickly to highland areas. The community-based safety networks in rural Lesotho mean that serious problems usually result in community assistance, but this help might take time to arrive and might not include medical expertise. Understanding how to request help through proper cultural channels becomes important when problems occur far from formal emergency services. Healthcare in Lesotho reflects the reality of providing medical services in mountainous terrain to populations scattered across remote areas. The system includes government clinics, mission hospitals, and traditional healers, each serving different functions within communities that might be hours or days. From comprehensive medical facilities, government clinics provide basic healthcare services, including immunizations, routine checkups, and treatment for common conditions. These facilities operate with limited resources but generally competent staff who understand local health challenges. Services are available for minimal fees that make basic health care accessible to most populations. The quality and availability of healthcare services decline dramatically with distance from major towns. Rural clinics might be staffed by paramedics or nurses rather than doctors, and advanced medical equipment is rare outside Maseru and a few regional centers. Mission hospitals, often run by Christian organizations, provide higher quality healthcare than government facilities, though still limited compared to urban South African standards. These hospitals serve regional populations and often provide the most advanced medical care available within Lesotho for serious conditions. Traditional healers continue to play important roles in Lesotho's healthcare system, providing treatments for conditions that modern medicine handles. PO or LY or can't access due to cost and availability constraints. Understanding when traditional medicine might be appropriate requires cultural knowledge that visitors typically lack. Emergency medical evacuation from remote areas can be extremely difficult and expensive. Helicopter rescue services aren't always available, and road access might be impossible during certain weather conditions. Travel insurance that covers medical evacuation becomes essential for visitors planning to spend time in highland areas. Altitude-related health issues affect some visitors who aren't accustomed to living above 1,500 meters. Symptoms can include headaches, nausea, fatigue, and difficulty sleeping. Most people adapt within days, but understanding these symptoms prevents panic and inappropriate responses. The education system in Lesotho demonstrates achievements that surprise visitors familiar with typical African development challenges. Literacy rates exceed 80% for both men and women, making Lesotho one of the most educated countries in Africa. This achievement reflects cultural values that prioritize education and government policies that support school access. Primary education is free and compulsory, though rural families might struggle with indirect costs like uniforms, supplies, and transportation. Many children walk significant distances to attend school, and weather can disrupt attendance. During winter months, secondary education quality varies significantly between urban and rural. Schools, Maseru and major towns offer educational opportunities comparable to South African standards, while remote rural schools might lack teachers, materials, and facilities necessary for comprehensive education. Higher education opportunities within Lesotho are limited, leading many students to pursue university education in South Africa. This brain drain affects local development, but also creates educated populations familiar with international standards and opportunities. The language education policies in Lesotho result in populations that speak Sesotho, English, and often some South African languages. This multilingual capability facilitates communication with visitors and provides access to information and opportunities beyond Lesotho's borders. Adult education programs address literacy and skills development needs among populations who miss formal education opportunities. These programs often focus on practical skills like basic mathematics, health education, and agricultural techniques that improve daily life and economic opportunities. Water and sanitation systems vary dramatically between urban and rural areas. Lesotho provides treated water and sewage systems comparable to other African cities, while rural areas rely on wells, springs, and pit toilings that require community maintenance and can present health challenges during certain seasons. Food safety considerations include understanding which local foods are safe for visitors unfamiliar with local bacterial environments. Most traditional foods are safe when properly prepared, but water quality and food storage conditions might require adaptation for visitors with sensitive digestive systems. Environmental health hazards include exposure to wood smoke from cooking and heating fires, dust from unpaved roads, and allergens from unfamiliar plant species. These conditions rarely cause serious problems but can affect comfort and breathing for visitors with respiratory sensitivities. Mental health support services are limited throughout Lesotho, reflecting both resource constraints and cultural approaches that emphasize community and traditional healing rather than professional psychological treatment. Visitors experiencing mental health challenges might need to access services in South Africa. Insurance and liability issues affect visitors who experience health problems or accidents in areas where documentation and legal procedures might not meet international standards. Understanding how to document incidents and access appropriate assistance becomes important for serious problems. The telecommunications systems that support emergency communication include mobile phone coverage. Throughout most of Lesotho, though signal strength and reliability vary with weather and location. Understanding how to access emergency services through local communication systems prevents delays during crisis situations. These practical considerations about safety, health, and education lead naturally to essential information about visas, border procedures, and cultural protocols that visitors need to navigate successfully before and during their time in the Kingdom in the Sky. Getting into Lesotho legally involves bureaucratic procedures that range from refreshingly simple to bewilderingly complex, depending on your nationality and planned activities. The good news is that most visitors find entry requirements manageable with basic preparation. The challenge lies in understanding how border procedures work in practice, rather than just in theory, especially when dealing with remote crossing points and officials who might interpret regulations differently than written policies suggest. Citizens of most Western countries, including the United States, Canada, European Union members, Australia, and New Zealand, receive free tourist visas upon arrival for stays up to 14 days. This visa can be extended for additional periods through immigration offices in Maseru, though extensions require documentation of accommodation, financial resources, and planned activities. South African residents and citizens enjoy special privileges that reflect the close economic and geographic relationships between the countries. They can enter Lesotho with just identity documents, rather than passports, and stay indefinitely without formal visa requirements. Though employment and business activities require proper documentation, the entry requirements include a passport valid for at least 6 months, beyond your planned departure date, and proof of onward travel. Border officials sometimes request evidence of sufficient funds for your stay, though the specific amounts aren't clearly defined and seem to vary with individual circumstances and official discretion. Vaccination requirements focus primarily on yellow fever, and only for travelers arriving from areas where yellow fever is endemic. Lesotho doesn't require routine vaccinations for most international visitors, though staying current with standard immunizations remains advisable for health rather than legal reasons. Border crossing procedures vary significantly between major and minor crossing points. The Maseru Bridge crossing handles most international traffic with facilities and procedures similar to other international borders. Smaller crossings might operate with minimal facilities and officials who process fewer international visitors. The main border crossing at Maseru operates 24 hours daily and includes customs facilities, currency exchange services, and transportation connections to both Maseru and South African destinations. Processing times vary with traffic volume and can extend during peak travel periods like holidays and weekends. Secondary border crossings like Vicksburg Bridge, Kaka's Neck, and Sandy Pass offer alternatives that might involve shorter waits, but could have limited operating hours and fewer services. Some crossings close overnight or operate with reduced staffing during weekends. Sandy Pass presents unique challenges because it requires 4x4 vehicles and involves significant altitude changes that can affect vehicle performance and passenger comfort. The crossing connects Lesotho's highlands directly with South African mountain areas while bypassing low-land routes. Currency and customs regulations allow visitors to bring reasonable amounts of personal items and cash without declaration. The specific limits aren't clearly published and seem to depend on official interpretation of what constitutes reasonable for tourism purposes. Internet and telecommunications access throughout Lesotho includes widespread mobile phone coverage through networks that provide data services adequate for basic communication and information access. Internet speeds and reliability approach South African standards in urban areas while declining. In remote locations, SIM card purchases for international visitors require passport documentation and can be completed at border crossings, shops in Maseru, and many smaller towns. Prepaid plans offer reasonable rates for data and international calling, though costs increase significantly for high data usage. Banking and money access includes ATMs in Maseru and major towns that accept international cards, though cash remains essential for rural areas and small businesses. The Lesotho Loti trades at par with the South African rand, and both currencies are accepted throughout the country. Credit card acceptance is limited primarily to hotels, restaurants, and shops in Maseru that cater to international visitors. Rural areas and local businesses operate almost exclusively with cash transactions, making ATM access important for extended travel. Cultural etiquette for visitors emphasizes respect for traditional authority structures, appropriate dress in rural areas, and understanding that photography might require permission, especially for people and religious or traditional activities. Learning basic Sesotho greetings demonstrates respect and facilitates positive interactions. Dress codes aren't formally enforced, but conservative clothing helps avoid unwanted attention and shows respect for local values. This is particularly important in rural areas where revealing clothing might be considered disrespectful or inappropriate. Gift-giving customs appreciate useful items rather than expensive gestures, especially things that benefit families or communities rather than individuals. School supplies, basic tools, or food items often generate more goodwill than costly souvenirs. Photography etiquette requires sensitivity to privacy and cultural beliefs about images. Many people welcome photography when approached respectfully, but some traditional or religious contexts might prohibit pictures. Always ask permission before photographing people. Language considerations favor English for official interactions and basic Sesotho for social situations. Most educated Basotho people speak English adequately for tourist interactions, while learning basic Sesotho phrases enhances cultural experiences significantly. Transportation from border crossings includes minibus taxis, private taxis, and rental car options, though availability varies by crossing point and time of day. The Maseru crossing offers the most transportation choices, while remote crossings might require advance arrangements. Accommodation booking isn't usually necessary, except during major cultural festivals or peak tourism seasons, though having confirmed accommodation can simplify border crossing procedures and provide backup plans when transportation delays occur. Emergency contact information should include embassy or consular services, though these might be located in South Africa rather than within Lesotho. Understanding how to access consular assistance and emergency evacuation services becomes important for serious problems. Travel insurance requirements aren't legally mandated, but become practically essential. Given the challenges of accessing advanced medical care and emergency evacuation services from remote areas, policies should specifically cover high-altitude activities and medical evacuation costs. These practical preparations set the foundation for experiencing Lesotho successfully. But understanding the logistics is just the beginning of appreciating why this mountain kingdom offers experiences that few travelers ever encounter and even fewer fully understand. After spending time in Lesotho, most visitors leave with a profound realization that it's difficult to articulate. They've experienced something that shouldn't exist in the modern world but somehow thrives in defiance of everything we assume about progress, development, and what it means to live. Well, this isn't just another travel destination you can check off a list. Lesotho represents a completely different approach to being human that challenges assumptions you didn't even know you had. The $500 monthly budget we've outlined isn't just about proving you can live cheaply in Africa. It's about demonstrating that meaningful experiences, genuine community connections, and daily adventures can cost less than most people spend on coffee and lunch in major cities. But the real value isn't financial. It's discovering that wealth can be measured in relationships, experiences, and skills rather than just bank account balances. Living or traveling in Lesotho forces you to slow down to mountain time, where schedules bend to accommodate weather, community needs, and natural rhythms that urban life has trained us to ignore. This adjustment initially frustrates visitors accustomed to controlling their environments through technology and money. Eventually, most people discover that releasing this control doesn't create chaos. It creates space for experiences that rigid scheduling prevents. The cultural traditions we've explored, from initiation ceremonies that remain genuinely secret to musical performances that encode historical information, exist not as museum pieces, but as living systems that continue solving contemporary problems. Watching Basotho communities handle conflicts, share resources, and make collective decisions provides object lessons in social organization that political science textbooks can't replicate. The physical challenges of mountain living create unexpected benefits that extend far beyond improved fitness, learning to read weather patterns, navigate by landmarks, and adapt to altitude changes. Develops awareness and confidence that translates into other life areas. Many visitors report returning home with enhanced problem-solving abilities and reduced anxiety about unpredictable situations. The hidden traditions that sound unbelievable to outsiders reveal themselves gradually to visitors, who invest time in building genuine relationships rather than seeking immediate access to cultural secrets. Understanding these traditions requires patience, respect, and willingness to participate in community life rather than merely observing it from tourist distances. Perhaps most importantly, Lesotho demonstrates that alternative approaches to modern problems aren't just theoretical possibilities. They're practical realities that work for millions of people who have chosen mountain community life over urban convenience. Climate change, social isolation, economic uncertainty, and mental health challenges that plague developed countries become manageable through community cooperation, environmental adaptation, and lifestyle approaches that prioritize resilience over efficiency. The transportation challenges, communication limitations, and infrastructure constraints that initially seem like hardships often become sources of unexpected satisfaction. Walking to destinations provides exercise and social interaction that driving eliminates. Seasonal food availability creates appreciation for variety that year-round supermarket access undermines. Limited entertainment options encourage creativity and social activities that passive consumption can't match. For budget travelers, Lesotho offers experiences that expensive destinations can't provide regardless of spending levels. You can't buy authentic cultural immersion, genuine community acceptance, or the confidence that comes from successfully adapting to challenging environments. These experiences require time, patience, and cultural sensitivity rather than financial resources. The lessons from Lesotho extend far beyond travel experiences. Understanding how Basotho communities balance individual Needs with collective welfare provides insights applicable to family dynamics, workplace relationships, and community involvement. Observing how mountain cultures adapt to environmental constraints offers perspectives relevant to sustainability challenges and lifestyle choices. The women we met demonstrate strength and capability that emerges from necessity rather than ideology, showing how traditional roles can support rather than constrain personal development when communities value contribution over conformity. The men display confidence that comes from competence in essential skills, rather than professional achievements or material accumulation. Children growing up in this environment develop capabilities and confidence that formal education systems struggle to replicate. They learn practical skills through direct experience, cultural knowledge through community participation, and social skills through multi-generational interaction that creates well-rounded individuals. Rather than specialized experts, the natural environments we explored remain accessible to visitors willing to accept that spectacular experiences require effort, planning, and respect for conditions beyond human control. These environments provide perspectives on beauty, scale, and natural processes that indoor lifestyles and urban environments can't replicate. Most significantly, Lesotho proves that happiness, security, and meaningful life don't require the infrastructure, technology, and consumption levels that developed countries assume are necessary for acceptable living standards. This is romantic primitivism. It has practical demonstration that alternative approaches to fundamental human needs can produce satisfying results through different methods. Visitors often return home with reduced anxiety about economic security, increased confidence in their ability to handle unexpected challenges, and greater appreciation for simple pleasures that expensive entertainment can't match. These psychological benefits persist long after the travel memories fade. The Mountain Kingdom in the Sky exists as proof that human creativity, community cooperation, and environmental adaptation can create sustainable lifestyles that provide security, purpose, and joy without requiring participation in economic systems that many people find increasingly problematic. Whether you visit Lesotho for adventure, cultural education, budget travel, or personal challenge, you leave understanding that the world contains possibilities for human flourishing that mainstream culture rarely acknowledges or explores. The Kingdom in the Sky isn't just a travel destination. It has evidence that alternative approaches to fundamental questions about how to live remain viable, practical, and deeply satisfying for people brave enough to experience them. Comment below if you're ready to challenge everything you thought you knew about what it takes to live well. Share this with someone who needs to know that adventure, authenticity, and genuine community still exist in places where mountains meet the sky, and ancient wisdom solves modern problems. Subscribe for more stories about places where the impossible becomes everyday reality, and where $500 buys experiences that money can't purchase anywhere else on Earth.